So I do it very traditionally because I saw a lot of media was there, and I prepared a talk, and we see a few footages afterwards. And the topic of this presentation or this talk will be reshaping the field, translating dance, and the search for a sustainable art practice. In the times of the corona pandemic, long forgotten by many, we consciously considered the possibilities of producing and consuming differently, not just in the arts. For most of us, it was not possible to pursue the old forms of interacting, working, and receiving. It was the moment of crisis that made us rethinking drastically and questioning the power of the familiar. No political, economic, or social concept, no bourgeois appeal or aesthetic school, no new commitment for transformation or reign of subsidy had this influence. Rather, it was the necessary search for practical and functional solutions to reshape everyday life in order to find answers to an essential emergency, such as the pandemic, on an individual and collective level. Digitality and the development of new forms of communication, working in Zoom or team meetings, online conferences, hybrid dance and film festivals with their online and offline formats, through to new aesthetic genres such as the Corona dance film, created an innovative and refined decades of traditional reception and fixed working methods by creating innovative aesthetic experiences. World-famous ballet and dance companies, such as the Ballet of the Paris Opera, NDT in the Netherlands, Australian Ballet and the Sadler's Wells Theatre in the UK, as well as independent companies, developed digital formats, live streamings, choreographies, and dance films for camera, or created pre- and post-reviews of performances like interviews, videos, background information of the performances with broadcast screening or screening of archival material. Dance has been translated into a different media, into a digital sphere and made accessible to global audiences. And this is a bit the aspect also how I use translation, like seeing translation not like a translation of text, but translation into a different medium, and in this case, into the digital sphere. When I was invited here to talk about questions of sustainability in the fields of arts, and in particular about dance, or in general when I'm that, I often ask myself whether we as artists, as choreographers, directors or curators, producers or scholars, are at all prepared to question our self-images and loved ways of doing things. Don't we rather see the discussion of sustainable artistic practice as another hype, as a peripheral problem of a rapidly changing arts and science market, as a set goal for national or European funding, or a even more greenwash of a late capitalistic world? However, questions of climate neutrality, CO2 emission, mobility, and energy consumptions are not just about limiting resources. Moreover, I'm convinced that it's about a fundamental change in thinking, developing, and realizing creative projects, about the question of a different way of producing and consuming arts. And I hope that we can elaborate and discuss this issue further during the whole conference. In Reshaping the Field, Translating Dance and the Search for a Sustainable Art Practice, I would like to explore questions of this new cultures of sustainability. It is an attempt to present new practices and examples for artistic production, audience development, and artistic growth. How do we meet our audiences? What are our values? And how do we want to work together? These are questions relating to a new relationship between art and society. questions about ecological, social, and ethnical change. And now I start with a quote from Hanno Rauterberg, beginning quote. Art is undergoing a change in values. It has to refine what it should be and what it can be, end of quote. So in the following point, I will describe a bit like a starting point for my further discussion. In his book Die Kunst und das gute Leben über die Ethik der Ästhetik, The Art and the Good Living on the Ethics of Aesthetics 2020, Hanno Rauterberg described the democratic commissioned artist as a social worker or producer of luxury items. And begin quote, there is hardly anything left of the modern ideals of autonomy, freedom, and originality. Today, the commissioned artist dominates the scene, sometimes in the role of creative social worker, sometimes as a manufacturer of glittering status symbols, end of quote. In recent years, it has become clear that the commissioned artist, described by Rautenberger, is increasingly a major player within subsidized high art and its respective European and national funding programs. In this case, the problem is that these state art funding art programs are intended from a political perspective to use the art sector to sensitize citizens and communities to a specific topic such as sustainability or climate neutrality. And now quote from our former in Germany, now she was not really a minister of culture, but she was in charge of this area, Monika Grünters from the last government. In 2020, the quote, begin quote, art and cultural achievements has an instinctive value as aesthetics works. They stand and speak for themselves. At the same time, culture is a carrier and mediator of values and a critical companion of social processes. This also implies, in particular, to sustainable art development. Because, for example, in this example, it is climate action I go on further. As another example, in its climate action program, the Federal Republic of Germany aims to reduce its emission of climate damaging greenhouse gases by, I think they're still changing it all the time, 55% by 2030. This reduction represents a challenge for the whole society as a whole, affecting not only industry, the energy sector, building, transport, agriculture and forests, land use and waste management, but all areas of society. Accordingly, the art or the creative sector, as mentioned above, has a key function in visualizing and discussing this individual and collective experiences, fears, and visions. However, this thematic linking from funding and this thematic linking of funding also means that artists are dependent on addressing this political issues set, which may contradict their own self-image and the constitutionally established freedom of art. In conversations with artists and other practitioners in the creative field, it often appears that the topic of sustainability is usually only used in order to acquire funding. This kind of democratic realism, I call it like this, sees state funding of artistic productions in direct connections with the emotionalization of ideological content, which often only leads to a temporary commitment by artists. However, the potential, and this is now important I found, for empowerment to generate innovative work processes is usually disregarded at this point. Art, and so my argumentation or artistic work, are used to emotionalize political issues. Now I go on and show you a bit an example. Another spirit, and this is like the first Tanzrauschen Screen Dance Academy I wanted to refer to, and it's a work which, and Kerstin will go into it more deeply following, like in her presentation, where we also thematized like the aspect of sustainability, working with communities or having a kind of conference, and I would like to present a few aspects and of the best practice or the aspects we found. From the 9th to the 11th of September 2021, at the first Tanzrauschen Screen Dance Academy under the motto Another Spirit, which was held in cooperation with the Wuppertal Institute, Rex Filmtheater, and the art broadcaster in Wuppertal in Germany, we asked ourselves questions of the innovative potential in the context of dance film and sustainable art production. What role do creatives play in the context of sustainable and ecological change? What are innovative forms of aesthetic production and consumption? And to what extent produce different kind of media, other forms of storytelling? For 3 days, experts, practitioners, and interest people of the city of Wuppertal debate in various working groups, live streams, discussions after screenings, and community activities, questions of sustainable art production. And there was, for example, and maybe you'll go on to this also about, in film you have concepts of green screening, green production, of green readers in theaters. So there are many examples where it can be very practical also on this issue. Starting from the field of dance, the focus on dance film, like in this conference we had, and which is a crucial part of Tanzrauschen, where Kerstin talks a little bit further. We represented another translation of dance, and again the word translation, so in the context, because you know maybe Wuppertal as the city of Pina Bausch, of dance, etc. So and that was also part of our work to really focus dance film as one aspect in it, and then to see how also then dance is translated in different media, but also how it can be translated in a different cultural practice. So that was our further approach. I want to go on now. In the immediate aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic in 2021, questions about the direct development of offline and online formats were also strongly debated. And Regina just did refer to it, that it was basically also a boost within the industry, and you know it also, what to do, what can we do to do theater in the conditions of the pandemic, but also we learned and created a lot of practices to it, how we can screen, which kind of off and online and hybrid formats we can create. For example, how do we tell stories in dance in hybrid online and offline environments? And what role do digital formats play in the sustainable debate? Finally, 7 thematic areas emerged, and that's maybe interesting to share. It was like after the discussions we had, and it was a very diverse group also of people, not only practitioners, but also, as I said, people from the city, expert in technology, so different areas. It emerged 7 points, and that was diversity, storytelling, practice, resources, conflict, co-authorship, and the question of new rituals. And maybe these 7 points are also maybe you will find them back in your discussions you will have here, or can support your discussions you have. At least for us it was important that we had them, or that they came to really map out, and I think this is the state we are in at the moment, map out this complex field of sustainability, or the question for sustainable art production. And maybe I define it a bit more, what I mean with these 7 points. So diversity, I mentioned as first one, offers the opportunity to involve different perspectives into the work process. And I mean really different perspective within the discussions. So for us it was important also to hear sometimes a statement sounds in the first beginning quite odd. We're so heavily used to hear what we hear and within our groups, but to get out of the bubble and hear different things, we find very fruitful for this discussion and really come back at the end to a very practical solution, or at least an idea of a possible solving of a particular problem. Storytelling, and in particular transmedia storytelling, and this was also mentioned before, combines different media and leads to possible new aesthetic experience. So for example, how can you tell a story in a three-dimensional space, like in dance, but how can you integrate this story, for example, into a film screened online or into a social media event or even in other programs. So linking different kinds of media to tell one story. Practice, meaning testing, trying out and developing new models in a kind of real-world laboratory setting, so in a Reallabor, you say it in Germany, and there are also, I will go on to this a bit later, to really think like in the industry and design, you have it like for a long time that you test out stuff. But we can also do it, to try out in groups, to test, is this idea good, would be an interesting reception of an event, what could you do, or how you can go further with this idea, to really be in direct dialogue with the audience or the potential consumer. Resources, meaning the question of reforming or recycling of old existing ideas, themes and productions, to really think how can I reuse an idea, or how can I, to save resources, how can I make it maybe work on a theme for a longer period of time, or how can I use research which I made before for next production? And we're so happy about the new, and we start a new project and then everything is starting with wide and with beginning, but actually how can we get resources maybe from others also, or from us to not start all the time with zero. So really about how is our use, also the use of old material. Conflict, it comes again, what Regina also mentioned, to drive the development of, and this I point out, intercultural conflict strategies that are necessary when considering old ways of working and establishing new practicing with different stakeholders. To really think, okay, when I have this great idea, and we all will come up with great ideas, but then we want to put them into practice and then nothing works again. And then great, we had this idea, nothing works. So to really think about what are maybe strategies, or what is my framework in conceptualizing it, that frustration is a genuine part of it. So that I know, okay, it will be problematic and this conflict will be part of this whole journey. And also if you work in different collaboration, also how it's an or with different groups, how is also quality needed from an intercultural conflict solving background or perspective. Co-authorship, and I think everybody knows a bit what I mean, like how could we work differently, and also which works a bit which deconstruct the 19th century notion of the artist genius to create new collaborations, synergies and network-like structures. So again, how can we work different? Like also beginning with the concept maybe to work with other people, and other rituals that are able to generate forming events with spectators and within work processes in order to produce sustainability in creative work processes. So meaning, how can you, sometimes in the beginning of the, when we went from offline to online events, it was like, okay, we put a film out and then it's screened. Yeah, great. So it's a bit like, but how can this really be an impact, or have another impact, or how can this really be an alternative to a performance, like in a three-dimensional space? not replacing it, but to add to it. And therefore, I think it's important then to which kind of rituals you can create. Is it an event, or is it a particular time when you look at this video? So to really engage or involve this new aspect on this new idea of presenting work. These considerations were influenced by the collaboration, and this I maybe just want to point out, with the Wuppertal Institute, one of the world's leading scientific think tanks, which focus on aspects of sustainability, production, and consumption in art-based environment, and especially on design. So here again, like to have the link, and there's to have the link not only creating a transdisciplinary setting within the art context, but also having a link not only to other industries, but also maybe to science context, and might be also to science context, to urban developers, to people who think about changes of cities, to create up this discussion, to create this, and now going on real laboratories together to really find a community of a transdisciplinary approach. And in this transdisciplinary approach, and there are a lot of aspects, and I can, if you have question, I can really go into detail this, like on a private, like on a different situation, like in design, where you have like this situations of where you involve neighborhoods, where you involve particular people from the city to test out things you developed, particular views. So to really get or create a co-creating process, which involves community and different artists. And therefore, again, like this experience, like which we had with this conference, another spirit was about exchanging experience within very different groups and in dialogue between artists, creatives, and urban society. I just, I don't know what's the time, just maybe to shorten this up a bit, I just wanted to present you one aspect of which is more like from the theoretical field for those who are interested in. It's the aspect of situatedness, meaning to really rethink about the context your performance or your artistic practice is based, to really think practically in which spaces are they, in which contexts are they. So really for further analysis, to really get first a detailed analysis of your own working practice. And therefore I just wanted to maybe shortly define what I understand about situatedness. The word situatedness has its etymological roots in the term situare, to place, locate, from the Latin situs, place, position. It refers to spatial or temporally dimensions in which one is located. So to really think about in this, where are you producing, in which context, which people are involved. And now questions for this, for the dance fit would be, how do we work when we produce dance, for example? With which actors do we interact? With which resources and material, people, techniques, props? Do we work in groups, in co-authorship, participatory processes, or alone? What do these respective forms of production imply, and what risks do they have? How do we deal with conflict, respect, and dependence? What kind of relationship do we create with colleagues, institutes, cooperation, viewers? And which corporal techniques, like ballet, modern contact improvisation, etc., do we use for our somatic practice? So really to map it out, to think about how do I work really practically, because all has an impact. It all has an impact also to share resources or to create or to rethink ways of working. because, and this also you have, for example, also you have this for production, but this same situatedness is also, can also elaborate or look at when you talk about consumption. So how do we see the things? How is our consumption formed? Which aspects are they? How do I work with media? And I think especially what you just said before, Regina, it's we work now in mixed or hybrid environments, but to really rather think about how is this new technology situated? The means that how do we use the technology to create an impact and to create a particular relationship with the viewer or with the person receiving it? Because I think that's important. What we then have not anymore, for example, when we shift from offline to online contexts, to understand, it was for me quite important to realize that how complex is actually a perception of a live performance, how many aspects are involved. And not only that when you enter the space, you enter space and you get into a dialogue, into a social event, in social communication with other people, but also like all the complexity we have in three-dimensional encounters, what could be, or how could we reflect this, for example, in a digital context? Meaning, how could we meet maybe other participants later on? How could we talk about stuff? How could we bring different kind of information? Now you see it like a lot of, and you see it from NDT to the Paris Opera or Sadler's Wells, they have a lot of, when they screen an event, so the whole event is actually first of all made for camera. So the performance shade, the concept changed, how you deal with dance. So it's not just hello, I see you're there. So it's not just camera. But the whole event is made for this performance. But they have interviews and about the let's say production, how the production went, how the whole process elaborated. They have background information about the choreographer. So it's all, you can say, oh yeah, that's all marketing. Yeah. I think it's, it's for sure marketing, but it's also more. It's more like to understand, to create a relationship with the viewer. And I think this is what I actually just wanted to point out. What are our relationships? Which kind of social configurations are we intending and creating? And I think this is actually one of the most important aspect I wanted to point out, that it's about to see the viewer as also an active part of this discussion and an active player, and how we can create this new social configurations, the interrelation between art content and the viewer or spectator, and what does it mean also politically or for us doing this kind of art or this within our practice. Maybe because I think we are in the time, maybe I just want to show an example. What we did to figure out, and this is like the theoretical term, these new social configurations, to really rethink and use this kind of sustainable rethink about sustainable artistic practice as an opportunity, as an force of empowerment for us as producer and as artist, and creating with this environment, not only creating new working surroundings which are maybe more social, which work with our own resources as practitioner, which have maybe involved different kinds of ethical values, but also create a different relationship to the spectator. And this is what we made. Oh yeah, this, maybe we can go one further. Can I go one further with the, oh yeah, snip, snip. Exactly. It's German, and you will have it online, and you will find it, and we have Google Translator, and you will all see it. So we created, actually, you can go on. We created, if you can go on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. So this was, come on, there, here. You know it's very, and you think we like kindergarten, but we created just to create a different kind of, to have a, to create a transparency of a very complex and abstract topic like sustainable art practice. We asked how can we get an interrelation to the people of Wuppertal, the people around us, and we said we create monsters. So we create these little monsters, which are actually the monsters of the old, or our old way of working. So we had monsters for, create monsters about diversity, and which had like question, for example, how does a project become more than just white and academic? Or how do you design and plan projects across generations? So really to find ways how we can interact, involve people to create, to make this sustainability discourse a very joyful and playful encounter, and think about it how we can come together and with other artists, other practitioners, but also people in your context, in your cities, in your communities. And maybe this is, so I can close, and maybe this is what I wanted to try to emphasize in reshaping the field, translating dance, and the search for a sustainable art practice, that it's an attempt to an ecological, social, and ethical change within art production. Thank you very much.